Why money is never just about money. Every single day, millions of people make decisions about money without realizing how much those choices will shape their future. Some people earn average salaries and quietly build wealth over time. Others make six figures and still feel trapped from paycheck to paycheck. And a lot of people spend years wondering, why does money feel so difficult, even when I'm trying my best? Most people assume the answer is simple: work harder, learn more, make more money. But real life doesn't work that way. Why do some lottery winners lose everything within a few years, while people who grew up with almost nothing manage to build real wealth? Why do highly educated professionals sometimes struggle financially, while others with no degree retire early with financial freedom? The answer usually isn't intelligence, it isn't math, and it isn't even income. It's psychology. Because every financial decision we make is influenced by something deeper than numbers. The way we grew up, what we saw our parents do, our fears, our habits, the stories we tell ourselves about success, security, and what money actually means. What feels completely reasonable to one person can look irrational to someone else. This isn't a video about complicated formulas or investment tricks. It's about understanding why we think the way we do about money, and how recognizing those hidden patterns can completely change our financial future. Chapter 1. Why behavior matters more than being smart. Ronald Read spent most of his life doing ordinary jobs in rural Vermont. He worked as a janitor. He pumped gas. He lived so simply that people around him assumed he had very little money. When he passed away at 92 years old, he left behind $8 million. Now compare that to Richard Fuscone, Harvard MBA, successful career in corporate finance, earned millions. And yet, he eventually lost everything and filed for bankruptcy. At first, that doesn't make sense. How does someone with almost no financial education quietly become wealthy, while someone with elite credentials ends up broke? Because financial success isn't mostly about intelligence, it's about behavior. Ronald Read understood something many people never do. Building wealth has less to do with what you know and more to do with what you consistently do. Our money habits don't appear out of nowhere. They're shaped by experiences we often don't even notice. Someone who lived through economic hardship sees debt differently than someone who grew up surrounded by comfort. Someone raised with money may not understand why another person spends their last few dollars on lottery tickets, without realizing that sometimes it isn't about logic. Sometimes it's about hope. And here's something even stranger. Modern personal finance is still relatively new. Retirement accounts, credit scores, consumer loans, most people are learning as they go. Unlike skills that get passed down for generations, many of us are trying to navigate money using limited experience and imperfect examples. That's why financial decisions that seem irrational from the outside can feel completely reasonable to the person making them. Money isn't just numbers, it's memory, emotion, fear, expectation. And until we understand that, we'll keep assuming that smarter people should automatically make better financial decisions. But real life tells a different story. Chapter 2. Luck, Risk, and the Things We Can't Control. In 1968, a teenager named Bill Gates got access to something almost nobody his age had: a computer terminal. At the time, that opportunity was incredibly rare, especially for a high school student. That single advantage helped shape the future of technology and eventually helped make him one of the richest people in history. But there's another part of the story people rarely talk about. Bill Gates had a close friend named Kent Evans. They shared the same obsession with computers. They planned their future together. They even talked about building a company one day. Then Kent died in a mountaineering accident. Same generation, similar talent, different outcome. One story became history. The other ended before it had a chance to begin. And that forces us to face something uncomfortable. Luck and risk shape far more of our lives than we want to admit. Gates gaining early access to computers wasn't something he controlled. Kent Evans's accident wasn't something he controlled either. Yet both events changed the future. Most people don't like this idea. Because if luck and risk matter, then life becomes less predictable than we want to believe. We prefer cleaner stories. Success happened because someone worked harder. Failure happened because someone made bad choices. That version feels safer. But reality is rarely that simple. We admire entrepreneurs who took huge risks and became successful. We call them visionaries. But when someone takes nearly the same risk and fails, we often call them irresponsible. Sometimes the difference isn't intelligence. Sometimes it's timing, circumstances, chance. That doesn't mean effort doesn't matter. It means effort isn't the whole story. Instead of focusing only on extreme success stories, it's often more useful to look at patterns across many people and many outcomes. Because patterns teach. Single stories inspire, but they can also mislead. And once you understand the role of luck and risk, you stop judging people too quickly. You become less arrogant in success, less ashamed in failure, and you start making decisions with a clearer view of reality. Chapter 3. When Enough Stops Existing. Rajat Gupta looked like the definition of success, born in India, lost his parents at a young age, built an extraordinary career, reached the top of one of the world's most respected consulting firms. He earned tens of millions of dollars. His net worth eventually passed 100 million. By almost any standard, he had already won. But then something unexpected happened. He became involved in insider trading and in the process risked his reputation, career, and freedom than for money he simply didn't need. Then there's Bernie Madoff. Most people remember him for the fraud. But before that, he already had a successful and legitimate business. He already had wealth most people never come close to. And yet, he kept going until everything collapsed. Thousands of people lost their savings. His own family was devastated. At first glance, these look like stories about greed, but they reveal something deeper, a trap that catches people at every income level. The problem usually isn't wanting more. The problem is never deciding what enough actually means. Because if you never define enough, the finish line keeps moving. What once felt like financial security suddenly starts feeling average. The salary you once dreamed about becomes normal. The house becomes too small. The lifestyle becomes expected, and the cycle repeats. Not because life got worse, but because expectations changed. Comparison makes this even stronger. If you earn $50,000, someone earns 100. If you earn 100,000, someone earns 1,000,000. If you earn 1,000,000, someone owns a private island. There is always another level. And today, social media makes that impossible to ignore. Every scroll shows someone richer, more successful, more accomplished. Or at least that's how it looks. So the real solution isn't to stop growing. It isn't to stop taking opportunities. It's to decide what matters enough that you refuse to sacrifice it. Your reputation, your relationships, your independence, your peace of mind. Because money can replace many things, but some things, once lost, never come back. Chapter 4. The Power of Time, Your Greatest Financial Advantage. Huge changes don't always begin with dramatic moments. Scientists believe the ice ages that once covered huge parts of North America didn't happen because winters suddenly became extreme. They happened because summers became just slightly cooler. Not enough snow melted. Year after year, a little remained, then a little more, until eventually glaciers formed and reshaped entire continents. Small changes, repeated long enough, created something enormous. Money works in a surprisingly similar way, and few examples show this better than Warren Buffett. People often assume his success comes from finding perfect investments, but one of his biggest advantages wasn't just skill, it was time. Buffett invested for decades, not one good year, not one lucky decade, multiple generations of compounding. If he had started later or stopped earlier, his wealth would look completely different. There's another example that makes this even clearer. Jim Simons generated higher annual investment returns than Buffett, but he built far less wealth overall. Why? Because compounding had less time to work. That idea changes how we think about success. Building wealth isn't usually about making one brilliant move. It's rarely about hitting financial home runs. More often, it's about staying in the game long enough for small advantages to become extraordinary results. That's why one of the most powerful financial strategies sounds almost too simple. Don't quit. But staying in the game requires something people often ignore. Your plan has to work emotionally, not just mathematically. A strategy that looks perfect on paper but makes you panic every market drop isn't sustainable. A good plan you can follow for decades will often beat a perfect plan you abandon after 2 years. Because compounding only rewards one thing, time. And time only helps the people who remain long enough to benefit from it. Chapter 5. Staying rich is harder than getting rich. Jesse Livermore became famous for something most investors only dream about. He predicted market crashes. While others lost everything, he made fortunes. His understanding of market psychology became legendary. At different points in his life, his wealth would be worth hundreds of millions in today's money. And yet, he lost it more than once. Not because he lacked intelligence, not because he stopped understanding markets, but because he took too much risk, again and again. Livermore mastered one skill, getting rich, but he never mastered another skill, staying rich. And those two skills are not the same. In fact, sometimes they pull in opposite directions. Building wealth often requires optimism, taking chances, believing things will work out. Keeping wealth requires something different: humility, patience, restraint, and a healthy respect for uncertainty. Because in finance, survival matters more than brilliance, more than beating the market, more than finding the perfect opportunity. If you survive, you get another chance. And the longer you stay in the game, the more time works in your favor. That means accepting something uncomfortable. Events will happen that nobody predicts. History is full of moments people once called impossible. Market crashes, economic shocks, unexpected losses, life changes. The goal isn't to predict every disaster, Nobody can. The goal is to build enough flexibility to survive them. Sometimes that means keeping cash available even when it feels inefficient. Sometimes it means taking fewer risks than you technically could. Sometimes it means leaving room for mistakes. Because mistakes will happen. Markets will behave irrationally. People will make bad decisions. Random events will appear without warning. Your job isn't avoiding every loss. Your job is making sure one bad moment doesn't end the game. Because wealth rarely disappears from one wrong decision. It disappears when there's no margin left to recover. Chapter 6. The Price of Growth. Why volatility is part of the deal. Imagine investing $1,000 and years later seeing it grow into $350,000. That's roughly what happened to long-term investors in Netflix. Sounds incredible. But there's a part of the story people usually leave out. The path wasn't smooth. During that climb, Netflix stock dropped more than 25%, 12 different times. At one point, it crashed around 77%. Imagine watching most of your investment disappear. Would you stay calm? Would you keep holding? Most people wouldn't. And that's exactly the point, because investing has a rule people rarely talk about. Returns are never free. When people think about investing, they focus on the money. But money isn't the only price. There's uncertainty, doubt, fear, moments where you wonder if you've made a huge mistake. Those emotional costs are real. They're part of the investment. And that's where people get trapped. They want the reward without paying the price. But that's like wanting the results of exercise without being willing to sweat. Volatility isn't a flaw in the system. It's part of how the system works. If investing were easy, if returns came without discomfort, everyone would do it. Prices would rise. Opportunities would disappear. The reward exists partly because many people can't tolerate the process. That's why promises of high returns with no risk should always make you cautious. History shows that trying to remove all discomfort usually creates a different problem: lower returns, hidden risks, or both. So maybe the better way to think about volatility isn't as punishment. Think of it as a fee. You pay money for things that create value. You pay admission to enter places worth experiencing. And in investing, volatility is often the admission fee for long-term growth. That doesn't mean taking reckless risks. It means understanding that discomfort doesn't automatically mean something is wrong. Sometimes it means you're paying the price of opportunity. And if that price fits your life emotionally and financially, time can do the rest. Chapter 7. Play your own game. During the dot-com boom, many experienced investors watched internet stocks explode in value. Companies with little or no profit were suddenly worth billions. To long-term investors, it looked completely irrational. This makes no sense. And from their perspective, they were right. But there was something they missed. Not everyone was playing the same game. Someone investing for the next 20 years evaluates value one way. Someone trading for the next 20 minutes evaluates it differently. To one person, extreme prices look dangerous. To another, they're simply part of the opportunity. Neither side is automatically irrational. They're just operating under different rules. The real problems begin when people forget that. Long-term investors start copying short-term traders. People abandon strategies they understand for games they were never built to win. That's often how bubbles form and why they hurt so many people. But this idea goes far beyond investing. We compare ourselves to people without knowing their reality. We see expensive homes, luxury vacations, successful businesses, and we assume we understand the full picture. But we rarely do. Maybe it's inheritance, maybe debt, maybe years of sacrifice we never saw. Every financial decision happens in real life. Around kitchen tables, inside relationships, inside fears, hopes, responsibilities, and values. Things spreadsheets can't fully measure. That's why there's rarely one perfect financial strategy, because there's no single game. The important question isn't, what are other people doing? It's, what game am I playing? What matters to me? What risks can I live with? What am I willing to trade? And what am I not? Once you know that, other people's choices become less distracting, and your own become clearer. Conclusion. The ultimate dividend people often think money's greatest value is what it can buy. But that may not be its greatest value at all. The greatest value of money is control. Control over your time. Control over your decisions. Control over how you spend your life. Maybe the highest financial achievement isn't waking up rich. Maybe it's waking up and being able to say, "Today I can choose." That freedom looks different for everyone. For some, it means security. For others, time with family, the ability to take risks, the ability to say no, the ability to rest. Real financial success isn't having the most. It's creating a life where money supports what matters instead of controlling it. That means saving consistently, keeping expectations realistic, leaving room for mistakes, defining what enough means before the world defines it for you, and staying steady when uncertainty appears. Because money has never been only about numbers. It's always been about people, their hopes, their fears, their dreams, and their tendency to make decisions that feel right in the moment. Understanding that psychology, especially your own, may be the first real step toward building a financial life you actually want, instead of chasing one you were told to want, and that may be the greatest return of all.